NATO, in my lifetime, has fought a number of wars. They were NATO wars, and there was opposition to those wars. The first war was NATO war that in Manchester we were involved in was opposition to the war in the Balkans, opposition to the war in Yugoslavia. And we had anti-war committee and we had marches of hundreds and then thousands of people. And when NATO bombed the bridges in the Yugoslav capitals, we occupied a bridge on Bridge Street in solidarity. There was thousands of us. But the next war, that was a NATO war, was when 700,000 troops went to the border with Kuwait and invaded Iraq with Saddam Hussein. That was a NATO war. We had what was called the first Gulf War. Hey, there's been 3 that I know of. We had an anti-war movement, and it laid the basis for the next anti-war movement. We had thousands who marched and protested in that first Gulf War. But when it came to the Afghan war, a NATO war, what more of a justification could you have? Because apparently it was those horrible Afghan Taliban that bombed the Twin Towers. And look at all those people who died. My relatives who live in America, he was off sick that day. Otherwise he would have, my cousin would have been dead in the tower. It affected people. You couldn't get a bigger, horrible person than the Afghan Taliban who bombed the Twin. Now, we know they weren't. The Afghan Taliban didn't do this. It was a lie. It was mainly Saudis that did it. But I remember the first demonstration on the eve of the Afghan war, and we had over 100,000 people in London. And everyone was like, oh my God, have you seen how many of us there are? Because people saw through this shit and these lies and opposed the NATO war in Afghanistan. The war the next war that comes with the war in Iraq, we had 2 million people on the streets, and that wasn't only in London, there was an anti-war movement across the globe. Now, when I showed the maps of NATO, there was something missing on that map. There was a superpower missing off that map, and that was that was the world's other superpower. That's how the New York Times editorial described the mass world anti-war movement, the other superpower. And it was so strong that in this country, for the first time ever in British history, a British Prime Minister went to the Houses of Parliament and said, I've got intelligence here that says that we need to go to war in Syria. And they lost the vote in Parliament. When they went to war in the Crimea, the idea that anyone would vote against it would never occur to anyone. It was impossible to think of, but they did. Tories and Labour, some of them voted, so there was no war. One of the Tory warmongers afterwards complained how the well of public opinion in this country has been irreparably, poisoned. Now, what we're not hearing at the moment is that they're going to send the 101st Airborne Division from, the elite troops from America to go and fight in and over Ukraine. Because the mass base of in America of the 2 main parties, both the Democrats, but also of what was Trump-led party, the Republicans, the mass of the working class people in America don't want war. They might love the military, but they don't want another war. And the hands are tied in a way. And therefore, I think we're going to see a continuation, and they more or less said it, of a proxy war if a war does develop. And they'll arm other forces to go and fight and do the dying. And where this can lead, no one knows, and is really, really horrible and really dangerous. So opposing NATO, I think, is not going to be as difficult as perhaps we could anticipate if we know the history of NATO and all its warmongering, and also the history of opposition to NATO. When Obama flew into Strasbourg to attend a NATO conference, there was a mass protest outside, and from Manchester Stop the War Coalition, we sent a coach all the way to Strasbourg to join those protests. Hey, we were attacked by tear gas dropped from helicopters, 20,000 armed French police, French army who encamped there, and also thousands of ordinary police. But we still had a protest, and there wasn't just a few of us. There was, you know, tens of thousands. So opposition to NATO wars is a fact, and we have a history of it. But if you look at the way we formulate what we've said in our demands, in Britain, we're saying NATO out of Eastern Europe, NATO out of Poland, Latvia, you know, the former Yugoslav states, those borders, bring NATO back from there. But once you can start to raise that, which sounds reasonable, they're there, what they're there for, they're going to be a war if they're there, then you can lead on to the demand, we should get rid of NATO completely. What's it for, you know? And the millions of pounds that are spent on it. And who is the biggest emitter of dangerous emissions that are destroying our climate? The military. They don't even count the emissions from the American military, how much oil they spend on their ships or how much devastation they do building their tanks and dropping bombs, you know. So we're facing a situation where we're going to be opposing a war drive or an actual war if it escalates. We're also in a situation of severe economic crisis that's just about to accelerate, and a ecological, you know, problems with you can say, oh, the virus has gone away, but just saying you're going to test and you're not going to look for it doesn't mean it's gone away or another variant won't come back. And we've got the massive, you know, climate crisis. So opposition to NATO, this war and the warmongers goes alongside the fight for economic justice, and therefore welfare, not warfare, will become, I think, a good slogan for the anti-war movement to have. Therefore, we're going to be entering into a very volatile future, but one in which we have a history in terms of anti-war movements, but also, and I think this is very important for us in the Socialist Workers' Party, the ability and the potential to provide political clarity and understanding so people can understand what is going on and therefore make the right sort of judgments. And I think it was Jeannie who said, you know, I like you, I listen to every single broadcast and everything. You get lost in it. I tell you, have Russian troops gone into those, you know, border areas or not? I tell you, we don't even know for sure, because both sides are spinning stories about all of this. But what is certain is inter-imperialist rivalry is ratcheting up. We're on the eve of a very dangerous situation that could lead to a wider war or a protracted period of a war fought by proxies. And in this situation, we have to, and we will, be out on Saturday campaigning to say no to war, no to a war drive, talking to people and explaining it. But most of the people we're going to meet have been brought up in an era, in an epoch, if you like, where anti-war sentiment is the norm. 1/3 of people opposed the Iraq war when it started. 2/3 opposed it when it ended. The movement went our way, and we should have political confidence we can win people to oppose a war drive from the West, to demand that Russian troops get out of Ukraine, and that the system of imperialism and imperialist rivalry is ended. It's one that we need to reject and to try and build a new world, another world based on people's human needs, food, shelter, not having to live in a war zone. These things sound small, but Martin said about wildfires, you know, this is all a reality that we're going to face. And therefore, the only solution, as it was in World War I, you know, as many people killed in World War I have been killed by this virus so far. But that World War, which no one thought would be able to be ended, was ended by revolution. And that's why we're a revolutionary party, and that's our tradition. So the main enemy is at home. Let's turn this system upside down and build a better world.
Well, thank you very much.